back in those days, if you was Pride champion, you was number one. If you was UFC champion, you was number two. You remember that?
Yep. People always put Pride up on the pedestal, saying that's number one, and then UFC was two, because those 10-minute rounds, those are gangster rounds. A lot of shit happens in 10 minutes. Like 10-5-5, that's a long fight.
Before the UFC ruled the sport and became the face of MMA, Pride FC was packing 90,000-seat stadiums in Japan.
My first time fighting in Japan, I was already famous in Japan before I got there. See, what people don't understand is that Pride was just as popular as UFC is now, probably still more popular in Japan. The results would be in the newspaper the next day, like the national news.
In the heart of Tokyo, under neon lights and thunderous roars, a different kind of war was waged, one with few rules and little regard for weight limits.
I think it's more of a realistic fight where you can kick somebody on the ground and knee somebody on the ground. That changes the whole defensive structure of your game plan to soccer kicks. I like it.
Fighters could stomp and soccer kick opponents' heads, not in an octagon or cage, but a ring. For many, Pride was the golden age of mixed martial arts. For 10 years, the best fighters in the world fought in Japan, and they were treated like rock stars there.
Oh my God, in Japan, in MMA, as a fighter, you got groupies. I don't think even still today, MMA is at its height in America.
But as time went by, there were rumors of something darker going on behind the scenes. Over the years, numerous allegations surfaced about Pride's shady associates. Just like the saying goes, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And that was definitely the case for Pride.
It's crazy that it could be so big in Japan and then dwindle away to almost nothing.
Japan didn't just stumble into MMA, they built it. Long before Pride existed, the country was already obsessed with combat sports. First came Shudo in 1985. Shudo was technical, heavy on rules, and it was deeply rooted in catch wrestling. Then came Pancrase in 1994. This is where Bas Rutten and Ken Shamrock fought bare knuckle, and rope escapes replaced tap-outs. And underground, you had Vale Tudo. There were no rules. There was no mercy. There was just straight violence. Japan embraced all of it, because for them, fighting wasn't just a sport. It was theater. At the time, fighters weren't athletes. They were like demi-gods to them. And the Japanese crowd was nothing like the American crowds. For the most part, they were silent and very respectful. It was almost a religious type of behavior. They definitely didn't cheer as often as American crowds. It was, and still is to this day, a different culture.
So when I fight in Japan, the energy there is totally different from fighting in America. In America, you have all these different energies. You have the people that want you to win, then these people that want you to lose, right? They're going for two different people. Like in Japan, they have their favorite fighters and stuff, like that, but they respect the fight.
Regardless, when Pride arrived in 1997, the stage was already set.
Welcome to the Pride Fighting Championship.
For those of you who are younger and unfamiliar with it, you need to understand that Pride wasn't a regular MMA promotion. Pride was like a war movie that never ended. Fighters came out to custom entrances, complete with pyro, theme music, and lights. Ring announcers didn't just introduce fighters, they screamed their names.
Wanderlei Silva!
The theatrics and presentation mattered. Pride made every fight feel like a world title bout, even if it was just two guys trying to survive the night. It started with a dream matchup, pro wrestling icon Nobuhiko Takada versus the Brazilian jiu-jitsu legend Rickson Gracie.
Takada guy, he was very famous, the #1 pro wrestler, so they tried to put him with me to just not only make a great business, but a good fight.
And that's what launched Pride.
Yes.
Obviously, it wasn't close. Rickson Gracie dominated the pro wrestler, but that was never the point. Because Pride wasn't about records, it was really about moments in time. It became some sort of modern coliseum for legends like Wanderlei Silva, Fedor Emelianenko, Shogun, and Rampage.
The best fighters was in Pride, in Japan.
These guys didn't just fight each other, they destroyed each other.
Oh, big right hand! Oh my God!
Compared to today's UFC rules, Pride's rules were insane. Moves like stomps and soccer kicks were legal. Knees to a grounded opponent were perfectly fine. And there were no cages or octagons either. There was just a white ring, like pro wrestling, surrounded by ropes and chaos. This was MMA dialed up to 11. And yes, it was as beautiful as it was barbaric.
Another stomp! Make it 4 stomps, idea!
Was it too much? We'll let you decide. But Pride had some of the greatest rivalries in MMA history. We're talking about the likes of Wanderlei Silva versus Rampage Jackson.
Jackson meets him with a smile. Silva, nothing but focus.
Two killers with no respect, only pure hatred.
Okay, it's on. That's what I'm talking about, folks.
Silva finished Rampage twice with knees so violent they made global headlines.
When Wanderlei knocked me out, that was my first time ever getting knocked out. And I didn't even go all the way unconscious. I remember hanging on the ropes. You remember that? Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking like, damn, I just got knocked the fuck out.
Their rivalry didn't just sell tickets, it turned them into stars. Then, there was Shogun versus Arona, a war that ended with Shogun raining down soccer kicks and hammer fists like a man possessed. Cro Cop versus Fedor, two legends, opposite styles, the striker versus the Sambo master. No trash talk, just tension, hype, and execution. It was chess with blood on the board. Fedor won, but both men walked out more iconic than before.
Which shows you how good Fedor was in his prime, because those two fought in their prime, and Fedor was walking him down.
Fedor gives no fucks.
He was a wild.
Fedor was untouchable. He walked through giants like Zulu and Sapp, out-grappled Nogueira, and outstruck Cro Cop. Never looked scared. Wanderlei Silva was the opposite.
He was a animal, dude. He was an animal. He was so scary. Monster, dude. He was a monster in his prime.
He thrived on chaos and made his opponents bleed.
He was the most fierce pre-game fighter. The way he'd look at you like, I want to kill you for taking this fight.
Yeah.
Nobody was scarier than him in his prime.
Yeah.
Pride didn't care about records. It cared about moments. Don Frye versus Takayama was such an absurd brawl that it felt like a scripted fight scene. They grabbed each other's heads and just swung until one of them broke. It was a pure spectacle, and fans couldn't look away. Freak fights had a special place in Pride. Nogueira versus Bob Sapp looked like a hit job. Sapp powerbombed Nog like it was a WWE match, but Nog survived and submitted the giant, proving once again that skill beats size. Sometimes it felt like a circus. Giant Silva, a 7-foot-tall former pro wrestler, was fed to skilled strikers just to see what would happen. One guy even fought in a full pro wrestling mask against Cro Cop. In Pride, anyone could fight anyone. But if there's one thing that truly separated it from other fight promotions, it was the Grand Prix. These weren't tournaments. They were gauntlets. Fighters competed multiple times in a single night. No time to recover, no excuses, just willpower and violence. The 2005 Middleweight Grand Prix might be the greatest tournament in MMA history. Shogun fought and beat Rampage, Little Nog, and Arona, all in the same bracket. And he didn't just win, he finished everyone.
Mauricio Shogun Rua, remember, 23 years old, goes through Quinton Rampage Jackson, Antonio Rogerio Nogueira, one of the best fights in Pride history, and Ricardo Arona to win that Grand Prix. And then in one night, Mauricio Shogun Rua, a beast at that age, man.
Oh, yeah.
But behind all of that success was blood money.
And then after a while, I asked somebody, they're like, oh, those are the bosses, those are the Yakuza.
Did they have missing fingers?
And some of them did.
The Yakuza had their claws deep in Pride from the start. They funded events, they picked fighters, and yes, they also fixed fights. There were also whispers that Pride's wild rules, including the soccer kicks and head stomps, only existed because of backdoor deals with local officials. Some matchups were works of fiction. Big names were being protected, and fights were being thrown. Take Heath Herring, for example. He was training for a specific opponent. 10 days before the fight, Pride swapped him out for Cro Cop, who was one of the deadliest strikers in the world. There was no injury or scheduling conflict, just a sudden change. Obviously, Cro Cop won easily, and while no one inside Pride ever confirmed it, rumors swirled that the switch wasn't random. Certain people had money on the outcome. One night, they allegedly told Bob Sapp they'd only give him a contract after he fought.
He's like, I'm still willing to fight, just give me the contract. They never gave him the contract. Yeah, he was telling me that story the whole time. He's like, look, I was there.
Is that the Yakuza? Like, what are they doing over there? How's that work?
I would imagine, yeah.
There's some
I get the vibe that it is a little bit.
But here's the thing, though. the Pride fans didn't care, because at the end of the day, the spectacle they were there to watch wasn't slowing down. However, behind the curtain, things were getting darker than anyone suspected. Intimidating guys like Rampage Jackson were being pressured by the Yakuza.
And he was talking and he said like, oh, I heard your oldest brother here in Japan. I'm like, how the f you know my brother here in Japan? He said, oh, I know everything that's going on. I'm like, oh.
Fight outcomes were whispered in the locker rooms, and some fighters didn't even know what was real anymore. A journalist called Zach Arnold, who covered Pride's collapse in real time, described what the atmosphere was like backstage. Fighters knew better than to ask questions, especially about who was really signing their checks. It wasn't just a fight promotion, it was a chessboard, and the Yakuza were playing everyone.
And I just see these guys walk around in like nice expensive suits, and then everybody just put their head down, put their back against the wall, and just bow.
Whoa.
In 2003, Fedor Emelianenko was Pride's biggest star. But at the time, his manager, Mijatovic, was negotiating with a rival promotion. Pride wanted Fedor locked down exclusively, though, so they made an offer. According to Mijatovic, he was called to a hotel. Inside the suite, Pride president Sakakibara was waiting, but he wasn't alone. Sitting beside him were armed members of the Yakuza, and their message was simple. Sign over Fedor, or you're not leaving the room. First, they placed a gun on the table, and then they pointed it at his head.
One of the guys pulled out his gun, put it on the table, and we continued to talk. And when I continued to push back, he picked the gun up and aimed it to my head and said, you know what's going to happen if you don't sign.
Mijatovic had no choice, so he signed. But after signing, he disappeared for 2 years. Unbeknownst to the Yakuza, he was working quietly with Japan's national police. And then, in 2006, the fallout hit. The Japanese media exposed the Yakuza's involvement, sponsors pulled out overnight, and TV deals evaporated. Without that backing, Pride collapsed, and in 2007, the UFC swooped in, buying the remnants for $65 million.
Pride is an organization, and you, the fans, all benefit, and the fighters, to find out who really is the best fighter in the world.
They said they'd keep it alive, but that was a lie. Unfortunately for the fans, Pride was already dead. The ring went quiet, the stomps stopped echoing, and the legends scattered. Some, like Rampage and Shogun, crossed over to the UFC, but Pride, in all its madness and magic, was over.
It's crazy that it could be so big in Japan and then dwindle away to almost nothing. So you see events from Japan now, it's like a shadow of what it was.
Pride was like a fever dream, a beautiful, violent, unforgettable one. It birthed legends, bent rules, and burned out spectacularly. It changed MMA forever. While the chaos backstage kept it unpredictable, the violence inside the ring made it unforgettable. Today's UFC might have the money, but it will never have the same madness because there will never be another Pride. Because Pride never dies.